Yo, 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 yo. Welcome to another installment of the FT podcast. We out here rotating under the five P's. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. We're out here rotating with my true player, my true partner in Abdul. And just say what's up.
What
And we
up?
got the homie, and we got a guest, man. We got a dope guest in the building for this episode. We got Aaron.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me on board. Coming to you live from Baltimore, Maryland. Very excited to be on here. So, yeah.
Yeah, man. I'm in Texas. You're in Maryland, and Abdul's in the six.
Yep.
Yep. All right. And so, man, let's just fucking get it cracking, man. Let's start with, for the third podcast in a row, I don't give a fuck if we sound redundant by now, but we need to still discuss this Neymar to PSG story. This is a guy who has, I'd say, I don't know, man. This is a player who has a matchless genius, okay? Amongst a large player pool, around Europe. This is a player who is arguably the best player in the world. So we can honestly style this as an era-defining transfer. Aaron, like, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on what has pretty much transpired over the past couple weeks?
In a way, I do see some parallels to the Bonucci transfer, right? In that I see that when it initially happened, there was this big cloud of what the hell is going on? Why is this transfer even being talked about? But as time goes on and it's getting closer to completion, it doesn't seem as crazy as it seems. So for me, I think when you look at the implications for PSG and for Barcelona and for Neymar, it's not the worst thing in the world. And I mean, I'm a big believer in whatever the player wants to do, that's what should guide them. So if Neymar wants to leave, I have no problem with that. I know that he is being criticized for taking what many consider potentially a step down, but you have to also look at the way that Brazilian people are viewing this transfer. I read somewhere that in some poll for a bunch of Brazilian football fans, 3/4 of them were in favor of Neymar's moves, So here is a group of people that want nothing more than to see their idol, the face of a nation, go and just dominate and take control of his own team and sort of step out of Messi's shadow. And one could argue that Barcelona's prestige isn't necessarily so high anyways right now.
It isn't. I've been saying this too. Recently, ever since they signed Suarez, they've kind of looked like minnows in the market. We see these low-level buys like Jeremy Mathieu, Arda Turan. Arda Turan's a great player, but obviously, as what we've seen in the past couple of years, it wasn't the right decision. Dennis Suarez. It's just a bunch of fodder that really don't.
I'm personally not a fan of at all.
Also letting go of Dani Alves and not even buying a replacement. They just assumed that
Sergio Roberto.
Yeah, Sergio Roberto can fill in. I mean, he's a good player, but to let go of arguably the best right back of all time and just not even bother buying a replacement is dumb, And yeah, I mean, for Neymar, we talked about it, countless times now, but I just read something on Twitter that was the PSG president, Nasser. He was in an interview and he was asked about Neymar, and he said, "Everything feels more delicious when it happens at a convenient time." So I don't know. I guess that kind of confirms it.
Yeah, I think what confirmed it for me basically was it Brazil's shout out Brazil Stats on Twitter, man.
Great account, by the way. The hustle, all of them do it right away.
The hustle is real, man. The guy covers Neymar like 24/7.
Yeah, man. This dude out here doing graveyard shifts, with Neymar. It's crazy. But I think he had a source from Paris United 6. That's another Twitter account. Yeah, and they're 90% of PSG news they're in tune with. It's just a great account. So even when, PK, decided he was probably off the Henny on that night. We know what happened. And he decided to put Sequeda. He said Sequeda. And then a couple of days later at the press conference, he backtracks. He pretty much put, his dignity on the line, his hoping that Neymar would stay, but that's not
And
gonna
Barca fans, after he put out that tweet, he was like a hero on.
Yeah, you got idiots out here going
but
el presidente and shit.
El presidente.
But with every passing day, it's becoming more and more likely. And for me, I think all that's missing from this transfer is the official announcement. I mean, at this point, I think it's a foregone conclusion. And once we get over the initial shock with how this affects Barcelona, I think we can see that there's some silver linings for Barca as well. I mean, right now, for me, it's so much to take in. You're losing, as you said, one of the greatest players in the game right now. But with that, maybe they could take the money and actually spend it on players that will improve overlooked areas of the squad. As you said,
This is where I have to disagree.
That's what we thought. Look. Okay, so 9 years ago, United sold Cristiano Ronaldo for a world record fee at the time, right?
That's transfers done wrong after, but continue.
But who did they replace Ronaldo with on the United side? They got Antonio Valencia, Michael Owen,
Gabriel Obertan. Oh man,
Gabriel Obertan. These are not. You can clearly see that these were not. These are not the right decisions. Valencia's turned out to be a pretty solid fullback. He had some great years. Early on at United, but you can clearly see that all those dudes, if you were to fucking merge them together, like Dragon Ball Z with Vegeta and Trunks or some shit, with Trunks and Goten, and just make I don't know, if you were just merge these dudes, they still wouldn't be half the player Cristiano Ronaldo is.
Yeah, some players are just irreplaceable and they're pricey.
Exactly.
But especially right now, right? You have 4 weeks left in the transfer market. You have 4 weeks left in the Mercato, and Barca, if they sell Neymar, everyone knows that they have over 200 million to spend, and they're desperate. So teams will charge them.
But the one point I do want to bring up though is to offset this transfer, PSG will have to raise some funds by selling players, right? So we've already established that Verratti to Barcelona, that's not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
I think it's still a bit of a success if you're looking at collateral. I think it's still a bit of a success if Barcelona can walk away with this with, for example, Rabiot, who I personally feel is a great player, would do wonders in their midfield. And they're if they spend some of the additional money, and this is really a dream transfer right now, but you look at someone like Dembele from Dortmund, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, in my opinion.
Fair enough. Yeah,
great players, but I don't know, because there are moments in a game, I guess, where you'll need that that moment of brilliance. Like Neymar against PSG, basically, those last 10 minutes of the game, he was playing at a superhuman form. He was playing at a superhuman level. Can you, with other players around the squad, what I really do think, in response to what you were saying, Aaron, is for the midfield, Barcelona really have to get that sorted out. Because still, you have Messi. You still have Messi. You still have the best player in the world, arguably.
No, it's not arguable. Come on.
No, yeah.
I'm a Neymar. I'm on the Neymar wave right now. But
to be honest, I do really agree with your point. I think that Neymar's last 10 minutes versus PSG, there's no other player besides Messi right now who
exactly they can do that.
Like that. But
yeah,
I do want to also make one other point. Something I see on Twitter quite frequently, that in a way kind of irks me, is just this notion that you need to spend so much money to get a potentially world-class player, right? So for me, just at a club very close to my heart, obviously Napoli, 28.5 million euro were spent last year on Zielinski and Diawara.
World class prospects.
Yeah, and so I'd argue that there are some better players and not better than those, I should say, but better players than Barcelona currently have in their midfield. And they could really update not by even having to make all these crazy champagne transfers. So
it's funny though, those deals were done inside Italy. So those were Diawara came from what, Bologna, and Zielinski came from Empoli?
Yes, that's
right.
Correct.
Yeah, so with Barca, I think they need to look down La Liga. There are so many, technically proficient midfielders in Spain. This is basically this is the heart of what most people's style is, possession football. And I really think if you got a player like, don't hate on this, but I think Trigueros, if you got Trigueros and you got him to play right beside a player like Busquets, I think he'd do some decent things.
He's only 25.
Yeah, good point.
But this is the thing. When you lose a player of Neymar's caliber and Messi goes on, let's say, just a patch of form where he's playing at a subpar level, where he's not playing at his usual level, I think Barca are going to struggle. I really do. If Messi goes through a patch of form where, the midfield's not clicking and Messi's not finding a way to get goals or influence the game in terms of assists or passes, then I think Barca are fucked.
I think Barca without Neymar could be, pretty comparable to Chelsea right now, where Hazard is like their only creative outlet, pretty much. Like he's the only creative player in that team. Especially with Iniesta aging, I think Messi could be the only creator in that Barca team, because Suarez is not the same kind of player he used to be at Liverpool. His numbers are still amazing, but he's not. He doesn't score goals out of nothing anymore. He's more of a runner. He scores from Messi's creativity.
Consistent touch, donkey touch.
Yeah.
So just saying that for pants, but
Yeah. So Barca, man, if Messi doesn't drop a great season, then they're pretty screwed, because Messi dropped a great season last year, and Neymar arguably dropped his best season for Barca, and they still only won a Copa del Rey. So imagine now losing Neymar and not really upgrading, because the players they're linked with, if they get Paulinho, is that even an upgrade in midfield? And if you look at the front three, Dembele would be a good player, but that's a downgrade from Neymar.
I think it's unfortunate because there's actually a player in Serie A who I thought would have fit their team perfectly, and I guess what I was trying to get at before when talking about Zielinski, Diawara et al. Is that there's talent to be had for not too much, and one of those players that just personally having witnessed him play so well and get a little bit under the radar outside of Italy is Lucas Torreira on Sampdoria. And it is unfortunate for Barcelona because he did just extend his contract to 2022, I believe. But he is someone that I always thought of as sort of like a Verratti light, where he has a similar skill set. And I think he'd almost be an immediate impact in that team. So
I watched a couple of his videos of him. He looks like Cazorla with aggression.
Oh yeah.
He's really talented.
Big fan of him.
I remember
Sampdoria, but he's an absolute terrier in midfield. Definitely should be one to watch. So if you guys do manage to catch him, this goes to everyone. catch some Sampdoria games next season. You won't regret it. But
Yeah.
I do have to ask you also, what do you guys think about all the hype and links to Coutinho? Because I've seen so much on Twitter, so much on social media, so much in the news about him potentially going to Barcelona.
Coutinho, that is right.
Yeah, Coutinho.
I think it will
I
happen.
think-
I think it's almost impossible for it to happen.
I think it'll. I don't think it'll happen in the immediate, on immediate notice, but I think it probably happens after the World Cup. I think Coutinho. I think Liverpool fans should just understand that it's inevitable that Coutinho is going to leave. But if he goes to Barca, I really see him taking down. I really see him taking down the midfield spot where Iniesta patrols. Because
So I know we're talking hypotheticals here, but let's
Yeah.
say by some stroke of luck, Barcelona managed to sign Coutinho this window. Do you think he's the best possible option they could get for that role? Or is
that
it
midfield role
Yes, exactly.
Like Iniesta replacement or to play with Iniesta?
on the left side of midfield? We got to look at your boy, man. Your boy in Naples, Hamsik.
Oh man.
He'd be perfect for that. But
There is one player that will never leave. So
yeah, I know he's so loyal. He should have left in 2015 at Juve.
See,
But,
that's a good point too, because I know, I mean, just how I see being a Napoli fan. You know, pretty much every high-profile player who's ever played for Napoli has ended up going to a bigger club at some point or another. So, like, we talk about Maradona, we talk about Dino Zoff, we talk about Higuain, we talk about Cavani, who I still love Cavani. But with Hamzik, it's completely different, because here's a player who I've watched for years perform at an elite level, and he's so into the club. He loves the club. He's almost an honorary Neapolitan, and he's not going anywhere. So to an extent, I think loyalty in football is a little bit underrated. I kind of find it ironic when some players are celebrated for their loyalty, but others are chastised.
Yeah. Do you ever see Insigne leaving?
Insigne is, I think he's another great example, but I think at some point or another, you know, the potential is there. We have to be realistic. Insigne could leave, but him being from Naples, himself being from that region of Italy, it's a very unique implication for the player. In most other cities, like take Manchester, for example, if you're from Manchester and you make it through to Manchester United, then you're often given the benefit of the doubt or celebrated by fans as a homegrown talent. Think of someone like Lingard, think of someone like Rashford, right?
Yeah.
But in Naples, it's a bit different, because the collective expectations and the weight that the Neapolitans place on these homegrown players from Naples, from the specific region of Italy, they have less of a patience for their mistakes. They hold them to a much higher standard than other players. And so it did take some time for Insigne to win over the respect of fans, but once he did,
Wow.
you know, it's an absolute special bond that you have with the city, because really there's no other club in Naples. Naples is a one club town, one club city, I should say. And once you make it there, you know, you're loved. You're an absolute hero wherever you go.
Yeah, that's true. So I guess this is where we just transition fully into Napoli. So how do you feel about Napoli in terms of expectations for the upcoming season? Do you see them as scudetto favorites or challengers? I see them as challengers, and I don't see it just with the quality of that squad. When you have players, you know, of the level of Insigne, you have a technician like Hamsik. You know, Hamsik does things in one touch that, you know, other players need, you know, 2-3 touches to gather themselves. You know what I mean? He's just
Yeah,
And
great
he's just
player.
an incredible technician. Incredible left foot, right foot. Also, they have a great prospect in Zielinski. And even though he's been getting hate as of late, Alan, that's just from the Twitter side. Alan, people see him as a workhorse, but I think on a lot of teams, even a team of, for example, I think a player like Alan is better than Ander Herrera. He can do Ander Herrera's job easily, and he would probably give you end product on form of goals.
I don't think he's a workhorse. I think he's just not as technically gifted.
Yeah, he's not as technically. Yeah, he doesn't stand out
But
compared to the others.
I think he's good. Technically, I don't think he's bad.
No, not at all. But yeah, he runs. He's very I guess workmanlike on the pitch when you watch him.
Yeah,
and then they have. Oh yeah, and then they have the other players that we all know about: Jorginho, Gulam, Koulibaly.
Yeah, that midfield is stacked.
But that midfield, the midfield.
Don't forget Marco Rog either. I'm telling you, a player to watch this season, Marco Rog. What a player we have.
Okay, wait. Can I say something about Marco Rog? I watched him against Roma. I think that was his breakout game. It was the game before. It was the game before they had Madrid in the return leg.
Probably one of his best performances of the season, by the way. So you picked a good game.
Yeah.
Very, very good that game.
He's very good. He's very intense. He combines, as Sarri says, he combines intensity with, technical skill. He's not as technically, I guess, aesthetic. He's not as aesthetic to watch as a player like Zielinski, but he's very good. He's very good off the dribble, and he's just I just find him as a very talented player. What do you think?
I feel the same way. I just got a notification onto. Sorry to sort of segue out of this for 1 second, but I just got a notification on Twitter. Calcio Reedy, great guy. Asked Hamzik, second greatest Napoli player of all time. Yeah, he just asked that to me. And going off what you just said and what I just said about his loyalty to the club, I'm going to have to agree. And I just want to say we can't overstate his influence to Napoli. And I have to be honest, I wanted to come in here, say, give my analysis, and say one or two controversial things that'll maybe get a lot of people talking. So my controversial statement for this podcast is I think in the last 3 seasons, Hamsik has been as good or better than Mesut Ozil.
I don't think that's really that controversial. I mean, other than
Ozil has that 15-16 season.
Yeah, other than 15.
That's it. Really.
Then that's it really for Ozil, right?
Back half of 14-15 after the injury, he looked good, but that's it really. 2015 and 2016 were good years for Ozil, I thought.
If you were gonna give him, I mean, just like Ozil challenged for the league in 15-16, Hamsik did challenge for Serie A in 15-16 as well.
Yeah.
I mean, they lost Napoli challenged until the last few weeks, right? It was the game against Juventus at the Juventus Stadium where they kind of lost the first spot, the Zaza goal.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, especially right now, I'd definitely take Hamsik over Ozil. He can play.
I was always hoping one of you guys had someone of a preference.
Honestly, I can't. Dude, when I watch Hamsik, and just see his his technical quality on show and just the things he does in some of the most congested areas of the pitch, and just that that whole Gulam, Hamsik, Insigne axis, it's so fun to watch.
They work
yeah, it's so beautiful to watch. And when Hamsik in full flow, I truly believe he's a top 5 midfielder in the world. I've said this many times. A lot of people have disregarded it because it's Serie A. People don't watch Serie A as much as they did, back in the day, back at its height. But yeah, that's really what it is with Hamsik.
He can play in a 3-man midfield. He can play as a 10. He can defend. I think Hamsik can play wide. I think he played wide before, right?
Yeah, he can play wide.
Yeah,
he can play. He's just so talented.
But going back to what you said, I know we kind of got into a tangent talking about how great Hamsik is. But going back to what you said, as what are my expectations for Napoli this season? Well, I think we have to be realistic. Juventus, there is a team that have won 6 scudetto in a row. And really, I mean, what more can you say? It's their league right now. It's the ball's in their court. Despite losing Bonucci and making some other signings, I still think they have upgraded offensively, which was a big part of it. So I think we have to be realistic and acknowledge that it's going to be difficult for Napoli to win the title. That being said, it's probably the best chance we've had. The best chance we've had in decades. So I don't want to write it off either way, but if I'm predicting how Serie A will finish, I still think Juventus, as much as I don't want to put them first, I still think they'll finish first.
Okay, let me just say this. Okay, because last season I made sure to watch as many Napoli-Juve encounters, as many times as possible. They've met in the league and they met in the Coppa Italia, if I'm not mistaken. And the first game, I think Higuain scored a double. I think it was in Turin, and Callejon scored off an Insigne pass in the second half. But in that game, and in pretty much most of the games that I watched last season, it's the same theme. The first half, Juventus cannot cope with Napoli between the lines. They cannot cope with the unpredictability in passing. They cannot cope with the speed at which Napoli are moving the ball. And then in the second half, I don't know. Napoli still have control in terms of possession. They're still controlling the ball. But Juventus, I don't know if it's that. I don't know if they're of the same DNA that you can say the pre 2000s, where not the pre 2000s actually, I'd say the early 2000s, where Manchester United were the best team in England, and even though over the span of 90 minutes they were never the superior team, they just knew how to take their chances clinically. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And still find a way to win the game. It's just that champions mentality. And Juve just have that. Juve, as Del Piero says, Juve is all about mentality. That's just what's ingrained in the club.
Which is why their Champions League record and finals is just really surprising. Like, how can their record be so bad?
Yeah, but that's the thing. Just going back to that with Napoli Juve, can you just explain that? Because the Allegri Sarri coaching duels, they're really fun to watch. Overall.
So I think you explained it exactly right. A lot of games, a lot of matches, it looks like the first half is the ball's in Napoli's court. They're doing very well. And then in the second half, it sort of falls apart. Like, think about the you mentioned Coppa Italia. I'm thinking about that in particularly when Napoli went into the break leading 1-0, and then afterwards kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit. Juventus scored 2 penalties.
That was pretty controversial.
Yeah, I mean, and then Higuain, to put the nail in the coffin, scored. But I might add that Higuain also missed a couple glaring chances that match. Can't let him out on that one. But so I think it's, as you said, but that being said, there were times where Juventus really looked beatable to me this last season. Most notably.
Exactly. And that's why it was just shocking to see you guys, be on the back foot towards the end of games, because seriously, from minute one, it just depends on it could just be a 15-minute stretch where Napoli lose their heads, and Juve, they're in the ascendancy. But yeah, I guess that's just football. That's just the
And
game.
it's almost like at a certain point, Juventus just shut up shop and nothing's getting through. And we have to wonder how different this is going to change when Bonucci is gone. But up until the Champions League final, they were conceding an average of, I believe, 0.25 goals per match. I think that was from Opta Paolo, but 0.25 goals per match in the Champions League. So when you're looking at that, really, I think we always talk about the striking partnerships and how effective they are, but Bonucci, Barzagli, Chiellini, there has not been another unit like that in recent times. So I think a lot of it's going to depend on how well Rugani and how well Caldara can transition and step up in his absence.
Yeah, that's true. So just Maurizio Sarri, like, can you explain just, I guess, just tenets of his, I guess, philosophy of just how he sets up his team uniquely to beat teams, that because Napoli's brand of football, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. And when they're in full flow, just from side to side when they have the ball, when you have a player like Jorginho and Hamšík or Koulibaly with the center backs, how they move up the pitch. It's apart from the center backs during the first phase with Napoli, it seems like no player is taking more than 2 touches on the ball. Everything is just quick. It's all short passing. It's risky the amount of short passes they're playing, and they're rarely do they ever switch the ball in possession in terms of putting the ball in the air. But overall, it's just a unique brand of football. What can you say to that, like, in terms of?
Well, you did a great introduction for it. I think a lot of people have made some comparisons to Pep style football, but I want to point out one distinction which I think really sets it apart. Often when you're looking at a Pep team, you sort of expect that Busquets type player
to drop in between.
Yes, exactly. But with Jorginho, he very rarely falls level with the center backs, where he's someone that's always in that space between midfield and defense, and that opens up other areas of the pitch. So essentially that causes other teams to have to mark out Jorginho out of the game, and then he's just switching the ball, moving the ball around very quickly. And then from there, it just gives so much space to work with. And I think what you said earlier about the connection on the wings, that's important too. Because when you look at it, you got Callejon as the classic winger on the right side. You have Mertens as the false 9. And then on the left side, Insigne cuts in. And that does so much damage. So it's as you said, it's fun to watch. It's beautiful.
I just feel that, man, it's about time Napoli deliver, because Hamšík, we've been talking about Hamšík for a long time, but he's getting old. He's about 30 now. And Insigne might leave, he might leave in 2-3 years. So this season Napoli have to at least, if they're not going to win the scudetto, then they have to at least go on a good run in Europe. Try to do something in Europe.
There's a lot of thought as to how to get the best out of the squad. Should Sarri change up his formation, or should he change the roles? And personally, I don't think he should at all. I think that the midfield is so strong. The 3 in the middle are just so crucial in the build-up that I don't think he should change a thing. And I guess that's where we get into how do you incorporate the best players. So I know a big topic of discussion has been Diawara or Jorginho? Well, for me, how about both? I want to keep them both in the squad, keep them rotate with each other, have them compete, but also realize each other's strengths and each other's limitations. So Diawara is more physical and much better defensively, but Jorginho has that passing range that really does well to unlock so many teams that aren't quite up to the same standard, and really put you on the front foot and score those goals. So I do think it's become almost it's become much talked about, but I do agree with the mentality now. Diawara.
I'll say this. I'll say this because I'm biased towards Diawara, but I will say this: in terms of passing, there's no doubt that Jorginho is the superior player in that aspect. But if given time and space, or Diawara will, he will play those vertical passes into your Mertens, your Insignes, or whatsoever. And I think the one problem with Diawara that he has that Jorginho doesn't is when you were talking about those DMs dropping in between. You'll notice with Pep's system, and Sarri's system is different. He wants his DMs to not drop in between. But
don't slide DMs.
With Diawara, the problem
I couldn't resist that awful joke.
Yeah, but with Diawara, the problem is he doesn't move enough in behind that defensive line and behind the opposition's front line. He's not making the pass angles for the center backs. He doesn't move. He's not as quick as Jorginho in the way he moves in between that space. And I think that kind of limits Napoli's build-up a bit. But, I just think that's where he just needs to improve off the ball. Because you can see he has that kind of lumbering style on the pitch when he's, running.
Do you guys think that Napoli have like a top 3 midfield in Europe?
I think so.
After Real Madrid and Bayern?
Honestly, yes. I'd put them right up there. When you look at the depth, what
about PSG's?
True.
PSG are quite good. Wasn't really thinking about them.
It's definitely a top 5 midfield.
Arguably, yeah. I mean, I don't see why not. If not top 3, then I don't see why not in a few years.
Okay, we talked about Diawara and Jorginho. The one more one I want to talk about is Mertens or Milik. What do you say to that? As the season wanes on, when Napoli get into the business end of the season, and let's just presume that they're still in, they still got multiple competitions, multiple trophies to play for. Where do you see, what do you see Sarri doing at that moment?
So there's been a lot of controversy on this, even within Napoli fans. How is Sarri going to get the best out of them? Should he play them both to accommodate each other? Because they're both very supremely talented players. But from my perspective, you take someone like Mertens, who has worked hard his whole career, often acting as a super sub. This is a guy who has put everything into Napoli, and you really seen the success from the training just transpire over to the pitch. And he came off with the seasons of his life, man. That's a career season right there for me. There wasn't anyone better this past season. Sorry, I should have specified. But you look at a season like that where, for me, there was no one better in Italy. And I think going off that momentum, you have to stay with the system, stay with what's worked well, and keep Milik as that impact player, which I think
It's funny though, because that season, Mertens, you would just presume, it's 4-3-3. Mertens is so short. He was probably playing as like a false 9 or something. But nah, if you watch the games, Mertens is making striker type runs. He's running in behind the defense. He's occupying, his little self is occupying the 2 center backs.
Simply put, it looked like the system was designed for him, which it originally wasn't even designed with Mertens in mind, but he was able to step in and play at a world-class level. And so I think going into this season, he's in his prime. He's coming off this great season where he challenged for the Golden Boot in Italy. I think you have to stick with what's been working.
So you wouldn't start Milik?
At this point in time, I'd say Mertens has to be the starter. But that being said, I'm a huge fan of Milik.
Yeah.
I would play him consistently, rotate him quite frequently. You know, there are some matches
It's funny though.
Start.
Yeah, it's funny though because after the Madrid game at the Bernabeu, the Napoli president was fuming, and apparently there's like a small section of Napoli fans that felt Milik should start over Mertens because I don't know because Milik started the season off hot too. People forget.
Yeah.
So I don't know because it seems like people were saying that apart from Insigne, nobody showed up on that night.
Well, that was tough too, just because where I've seen so often, Napoli will play a good game and then it's like they'll start smoldering and crumbling to pieces once they give up a goal from set pieces, or from a cross. Like just very poor. Like I have to be honest, that's a weakness for Napoli right now.
That's exactly, balls in the air. Exactly.
Yeah, we even saw that today with Atletico. But the first leg, Benzema's goal. I mean, rewatch that goal. There is no way he should be scoring from that cross. That ball goes into the box. That should be headed clear 10 times out of 10. That's just poor defending.
Is that due to the stature of your club? Like the stature of the players in your club? Because Insigne, Mertens, they're not the biggest players. They're still.
I agree.
Does that kind of hamper you guys on these set pieces?
I think it definitely does. When we just look at, but like I guess that's a trade-off when you have a smaller, more technical team. But going back to what you said about Milik versus Mertens, I'd say Milik, huge fan of him, as I mentioned. Absolutely crushed it at Ajax. He loves to have the ball at his feet. Absolutely lethal shot taker. But you have to remember he's also only 23. So I think it's not as drastic if he has to be phased in every now and then. Maybe some games he won't get to play. Maybe others he will. But, I think when you come off Mertens, the season where he's 30 years old, and he scored 28 league goals, I think, no question, he should be the starter going into the season.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So. Especially with Milik coming off an ACL injury. He's still young. I'm pretty sure that he's going to recover from it, but, it's going to take some time.
Yeah.
Just the last thing I want to discuss about Napoli. What do you see as Zielinski's ceiling? Because you look at Zielinski versus, let's say, what was a performance that really stood out? Inter at home last year. I think that was a really big game. I think people are going to look at that game as if Sarri turns out to, become a manager seen with the likes, extolled amongst the likes of Sacchi and Ancelotti or something. I think people are going to look back to that Inter game where he had, where in the first 10 minutes, Napoli just absolutely blitzed Inter. And Zielinski, he looks like almost like the modern midfielder who has almost everything in his locker. And he's very similar to Kovacic, the player you love, Abdul, in Madrid, where they can get the ball and they have the capacity, they have the ability to just beat 2-3 players in the middle of the pitch.
They can break a press with everything.
Yep.
They can break a press with a pass. They can break it with a dribble. They can break it with.
They can pass their way to the final third or dribble their way into it, basically.
So they're just next level dynamism.
Yeah.
I think that he's someone who, if he got consistent starts, I know we were speaking highly of Alan before, and I'm a huge fan of the guy. But quite honestly, I see Zielinski.
Yeah, he's not Zelensky, man. He's
Yeah,
not.
you're right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. So the way I see it is, if he gets consistent game time, that's potentially, I want to say, I don't even think I'm being too optimistic. I think he has the skills and the tools to be a top 5 box-to-box midfielder in Europe.
Easily.
Yeah.
I have to echo that. He's special in full flow. So,
you just watch him. He's a joy to watch. I think, he does kind of get a bit understated due to, some of the other bright spots in the midfield, because let's be honest, there is so much depth at Napoli. They don't have a bad midfielder, really. So, but as you mentioned, he's solid defensively. He's got the shooting ability. He can beat players with pace. Works high work rate. That's everything you want in a modern box to box.
Look, I'll say just to close off the Napoli talk, I'll say one last thing. I don't think Napoli will win the scudetto, but don't be surprised if Napoli make a Champions League semifinal this year.
Dude, I'm saying, I said that if they did not meet Madrid in the round of 16, I really think they could have done something special.
I mean, if they got City or Dortmund instead of Real Madrid, they could have easily, they would have been in the quarterfinals, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
Great. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think that anyone that hasn't really watched much Serie A, now is the season to do it. We didn't even talk about Milan's additions or anything like that. But quite honestly, it's going to be one of the craziest seasons in recent years. We have some very, very good players who have extended their contracts, even at some of the more mid-table or Champions League qualifying challenger clubs. Though there are some very good players within Lazio. So I think it's definitely worth tuning in. And I think
so
really
who
the stereotype of Serie A as a defensive league.
Yeah. Wait, so who, for you, if you were to pick the 3 strongest teams right now in Italy, obviously Juve, Napoli, the 4 strongest. So Juve, Napoli, for sure the top 2. Who would you have in those other 2 spots?
I mean, I think you have to put Milan in there, as you said. So it's got to be Juve, Napoli, Milan. But for me,
the thing, Milan, they haven't had the moment to,
put it all
mesh. Yeah, put it all together.
I see what you're saying. But for me, I haven't been overly impressed with Inter in the market so far. So right now, it's got to be Lazio for me. I think.
What about Roma?
I mean, I think, okay.
If they get Mahrez.
Of Roma, I think that it's quite unfortunate because Spalletti was so underrated last season. He got a lot of hatred even within Rome, from the media, from the fans, because of how he handled the Totti situation, which, quite frankly, I don't think he was wrong at all. Francesco Totti.
What was the crux of the problem with that?
So essentially, he wasn't playing Totti as much. He wasn't giving him minutes when people thought he was. Let him go up. But the thing is, for the last few years, I mean, besides that, maybe one of the last great performances I've seen by Totti, besides that wonder goal versus Manchester City, he's looked like a player with age. Like another player who's been the same way has been Pirlo. And I think those guys, the legends of Italy that they are, it's time. There's got to be a point where you say, okay, I'm going to call it a day. So Spalletti was getting a lot of unnecessary hate, in my opinion, for not playing Totti. But you look at the season, it was a record-breaking points total. They scored the most goals that they had ever scored in a season. And it wasn't without fault. They didn't have to do so well against big teams, but I think Spalletti was really key to their season. So now that they don't have him, I don't know really. They've been weakened considerably in the market, and there's someone who, right now, they're not someone who I think highly of their chances to finish top 3, let's say.
Yeah. Oh no.
What if they get Mahrez?
Hmm. That's a wrench in the equation too.
Zeko had a hot season too. He's
Yeah.
coming off a hot season.
I'm personally not the biggest Dzeko fan out there, just because I saw Roma create, I think it was the second or even the first most chances in Europe, and he missed so many chances. And I mean, I don't want to take anything away from him. He scored an unbelievable amount of goals. He was in the right position, but he is quite wasteful, and a lot of Roma fans actually found him quite frustrating to watch. So I don't know. I don't really know if he'll be able to continue that into next season. One player, though, who I am very happy for is Raja Nainggolan. We were talking about loyalty earlier in the podcast, and for me, that's a player who, while he plays for a rival, I have nothing but respect for. Nainggolan's an absolutely great player. I actually had the privilege of meeting him with Roma's squad in their preseason training last summer, and just what an unbelievably talented midfielder he is for them. So I think while they still have Nainggolan, there's still some belief that they can achieve a top 3 spot. But for me, it's going to be quite difficult.
Yeah. No, that's great. Do you see with a player like Nainggolan staying, basically recently signing the contract extension? Do you see his role changing? Because Spalletti seemed to use him in like all different sorts of spots on the 11. Like he would play, right next to Dzeko. He would play higher up. He can still play deep if need be. Where do you see Nainggolan going under in the post Spalletti? Where do you see his arc in terms of?
So I almost think it's not tough. I think it's almost a good problem to have, because you're looking at someone who, as you mentioned, is so dynamic, is capable of playing in any role, and I think they can continue to use him wherever they need. I think there's someone in the absence of De Rossi, there's someone who's captain material right there. Roma's done a great job in keeping him. So really, I think that we'll play him anywhere.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That's good. That's Serie A for that. I think that's the topic for Serie A. We're done with Serie A. Did we have any questions for the pod, Abdul?
I don't think we put a tweet out this week.
Oh, okay.
So not really.
Do you guys want to go to Premier League or
Premier League? Yep.
Yeah. So Matic just recently signed for United. A player of Nemanja Matic, player who was instrumental. And I thought, this is not me, Sison, I thought in moments of last season, he was just as important, if not more important, than his midfield partner in Conte. And I really saw an improvement in just Matic's, I guess, overall game compared to the season before, compared to that disastrous season for Chelsea, the season before. Matic seemed to be I'd say he was more of that calm presence in midfield, dictating where certain players among the front line should be, sitting back while Conte was running up and down the pitch, intercepting, doing what he does best, destroying the play, destroying opposition plays. So where do you see Matic fitting in this Mourinho system?
I think United will probably play him as the positional defensive midfielder in a 4-3-3, and then you have Herrera to his right and Pogba to his left.
Yeah, that seems to be.
Which is a bit surprising. Sorry?
Can he play as like the lone pivot? Obviously, Herrera will probably sit back with him.
He can play. I mean, You can play a 4-2-3-1. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Mourinho plays that because that's his thing, right? He always plays a 4-2-3-1.
Yeah.
But I think Herrera needs to play as well. I think for some, like Herrera's rated really highly at United. So
I have no reason. I have no understanding why.
Okay. Well, here's another thing that I want to say that I think might be a little bit controversial, but for me, Matches has to play in a midfield three if you want to get the best out of Pogba. I think that's why they signed him. I think if you do a 4-2-3-1, I think it limits Pogba immensely to make him at that attacking midfield role, and I think at the same time it limits Herrera as well. And I know there's quite a bit of controversy on Herrera. He's one of the most polarizing players out there. But if you watched him for Bilbao and the role he played, even when Bilbao knocked Manchester United out of what was it? Was it? I can't even remember. At the
Europa League.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. When he was knocked out under Bielsa's team, the role he played was a little bit further forward, and he absolutely looked fantastic doing so. So for me, I think if you put Matic further back, it frees up Pogba, but to an extent, it also frees up Herrera, and hopefully we'll return him to some of the shades and the roots that we saw him play when he was on Bilbao.
Yeah, we'll see. The thing about Herrera is that when I watch Ander Herrera with United, this is a player who his best assets to the team, like his strengths in the team, it's pretty, it's non-traditional for a Spanish midfielder. You would expect a Spanish midfielder to be some technical savant on the ball. But when you watch Herrera, he's better off the ball than on it, if you understand what I mean. He's very good in pressing the opposition's defensive third, especially when they're trying to play out from the back. So he's able to recover the ball, a lot in those dangerous areas for United to, I guess.
Don't you think that midfield it might be a bit like it lacks a bit
on
of
the ball? Yeah, on the ball, you can see Herrera's, you can see his deficiencies.
Because Matic always passes to his left. Herrera always passes to his right. They're both
exactly
one-footed. So again, like Pogba's gonna have to. The only player that really offers something special in that midfield is Pogba going forward. So again, don't you think that's a bit? I mean, that might be good in big games, especially when you're Mourinho. You like to set up.
That's the thing. I really think, because my opinion is that I have the opinion that Pogba, in opposition to what most people think, where they'll say he's best in a 3, I think you could get away with playing him in a 2. And
yeah,
I have
and
to on that. Oh, I'll let you finish. Sorry about that.
Okay, so for example, you can watch him if you watch Pogba internationally. He's always playing in a 2. This is a guy who's his footballing education growing up was as a DM. The first ever international game he played for France was against Spain. Actually, I think it was against Belarus, but he played a friendly against Spain 4 years ago, 2013, against the Xabi Alonso's, the Xavi, Iniesta, all in midfield. Played deep, had a great understanding of what he was supposed to do that game in terms of keeping the ball, finding the right opportunities to run up the pitch. Just those, I guess, just those moments per se. But with Juventus, I guess that last season, I think 13-14, Pogba kind of started being shifted out to wide areas where he would more or less, combine with the fullbacks, the Evras, the Asamoahs, those players, those types of players.
But on the other hand, right, at the Euros, when he played in a 2, in the final, especially against Portugal, it was kind of like
it's because his partner. I don't think that was the right profile
Yeah,
to
because
play
Matuidi's
alongside.
always the box to box, right? So Pogba
Yeah.
had to sit.
Yeah. If you played someone like Conte, it would have made more sense.
Yeah,
But
but even
Matuidi,
Conte is more of
he's not as positional,
yeah,
but he's just a better ball winner, if that
yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
Personally, though, on the subject of Pogba, I watched quite a bit of United games last season, and for me, it was terrible seeing him being limited in a double pivot. And I mean, I think he performed admirably in that role. I think he's a great player, but just from my perspective and having seen him do so well in Italy with a somewhat freer role, I just think when you have a player like that, you don't want to limit him. You don't want to take away some of his best abilities, which are letting him create those opportunities and push a little bit forward. And for me, I think unquestionably,
That's the thing, though. He is always forward. For example, when the cross is ready to come in, he's the first dude in the box. He has that freedom from what I've seen. Just
his average position, which was much further back than
that's true.
The ball, a good 15.
Don't you think that's important though? Because you look at
I think when we're looking at a player like Pogba, what he really needs is to play left side in the interior of a three, paired with the player that will take defensive pressure off of him. And I think in this case, that's what United, that's what Mourinho have done by going out and buying Matic. And I think this is where you're going to give him the ball in more dangerous areas. This is where what's going to allow him to get further forward. And there were some games where United played last year where the team just looked lost without him, and that's understandable. I mean, we're talking a player who is just so good on the ball, but for me, I really don't think that he should be limited by further back. I think he's much more dynamic than that, and I think that in a weird way, like I'd love to see him develop into that like technician type of player that we were praising Hamsik for. I mean, the different skill set.
That's the thing, though. That's the thing. Do you think it's the right system now? Because 3 seasons ago, you had Yaya Toure in a double pivot, and he gave you 20 goals from a double pivot position, playing in a 4. Basically, it was what, 4-2-3-1 or 4-4-2 that Pellegrini liked to play throughout that season. And Yaya Toure from deep, no homo, was able to get 20 goals. I really think if you can, I guess, unlock United's attacking potency with the players, the likes of Mkhitaryan, Martial, if you can play, I'd say, if you can have an attacking 4 and Pogba behind those 4, I think Pogba plus an attacking 4 would sound really good. That's really how I feel about that in terms of.
I see what you're saying, but I also just think of Yaya Toure as having kind of a different skill set, and just for me, I think Pogba thrives the most when he has some defensive responsibility, but when he's not counted on, when the collective weight is on him, when United depended on him to create everything and receive the ball in his own halves and just carry it forward, I don't think that's the best use of the talent. I mean, we'll have to see how Mourinho can incorporate him into his system. Anyone that follows me knows I'm not the biggest fan of Mourinho or his style of play. But that being said, I almost don't know what to expect. I'm hoping what we'll see is Matic behind Herrera and Pogba, but at the same time, should he play in a double pivot?
I think he'll be fine in the 3 as well, as long as he's facing the opposition and not receiving back to goal. Because that's another feature of as long as he's not receiving back to goal in some of the most just congested areas, really.
I agree, because when it comes down to it, the formations themselves don't matter as much as the actual tactical plan. United played. This is the one people always give, but I think it's quite funny when you think about it this way. But when United played a 4-3-3 versus Ajax in the Europa League final, it was quite different than watching prime Barcelona with their 4-3-3.
Exactly.
I sometimes I have to tell myself that when I get so hung up on these formations because it is at the end of the day it comes down to the player instructions that Mourinho is giving, what he has planned, what sort of system.
Yeah, and that's the thing. In those games of big fixture early on, he would have Pogba in the half space, basically backing a fullback or some defender, and he would, players would try to play to his feet, play the ball to his feet. That's not. I just don't think that's in the Premier League, especially where Pogba wants to have, I guess, multiple touches. That's just not ideal in the Premier League. Pogba always has to face the play, always. That's how he shines, because you can't play him. Even there were even moments where I was a bit. That was more early on in the season where Pogba would play a pass and he would make just so many unnecessary runs towards the wing because that's just what he was used to at Juve, playing with Sandro and other players. But what we need, I feel like, for United to, I guess, blossom, they need Pogba in the middle third, facing the play, being dynamic, getting to the final third, either passing or, dribbling. And as long as, look, his chance creation stats against, if we were to disregard the top six, because part of that we can attribute that to Mourinho's, his.
But I'm sorry,
how
like
he wants to attack the game.
If you're a top player, even if you're not playing in a proactive system, you should still be able to affect the game. Like, how many players have played in systems that are just where you invite pressure and so on and so forth, and they still had an imprint on the game. Like for example, Pogba had some, like, his performance against Liverpool. That's not, like, you can't blame that on Mourinho, especially that United want to go down and they were actually the proactive team for I'd say most of that game.
Yeah, that's one game. There'll be the occasional game where your star player underperforms. Because in the previous game to that, if we look at the game at Anfield,
he played as
was basically playing as, like, not even as a 10. It's almost like a supporting striker. I've never seen that.
Yeah.
I've never seen that before, and I thought that was absolutely disgraceful on Mourinho's part to just play. It was just it was anti-football, basically.
He was actually higher than Ibra.
He was actually. It was the most disgraceful thing I've ever seen. Seriously,
that's certainly not the best use of his talent. I think, like, there have been people calling for Pogba to play, almost as that 10 type player, almost as like Rooney's old position and inherit that role. And I just think you paid so much money for this player who's one of the most dynamic and most well-rounded, complete midfielders out there. I think you have to play him a little bit further back. So I guess now we've gotten to the point where we have to, you have to find that perfect median for Pogba's role.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, not too much ahead, not too far
back. That sometimes can be the problem, because when Pogba's at his best, he's looking dynamic, in terms of he'll take the ball, he'll take on players, he'll be dominant in his passing. But more so often than not, especially when he's playing with France, when he's having a great game for France, it's usually through his passing. He's dominating the game through his passing. And that's where I guess maybe me and you kind of differ, where you feel Pogba should play a bit higher up, and I feel Pogba should play a bit deeper. Because if you look at Pogba's contemporaries, the Thiagos, the Verrattis, just the contemporaries he has in midfield, those other players, they kind of play that, I guess, controlling. They kind of help, they play that control. They're more controlling type players. And I feel Pogba could, evolve into being that plus more, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Yeah. So.
I totally see your point. And just on that subject of complete midfielders, I have to ask, what do you guys think about the whole Naby Keita to Liverpool failure? How do you feel about that?
I don't think it's gonna happen.
Oh,
Yeah,
I think it's a foregone conclusion that's not happening. But like, how do you feel? Like, do you think that the players should have pushed for a move, or do you think they?
I think I don't with Naby Keita. I don't think he should have pushed for the move because, well, especially if you're Liverpool, you don't really need him to push for the move. He has by the next season he'll have a clause, right? If I'm not mistaken, in his contract, so you could pay it then. And if you're Naby Keita, do Leipzig have a chance at playing in the Champions League? I need to ask that first because I know there's like some controversy there.
It's a good move for him. Like playing under Klopp, I think Klopp would take his game to that next level. Like I'm already watching Salah, obviously, and I've been following Salah since he was really young. And Klopp is just taking his game to that next level. Like he's expressing himself more. He's more creative. I think he just scored a goal right now, actually, against Bayern. The friendly's on right now. So
go ahead.
that's his like fourth or fifth goal in like 3 games. Yeah, so it's a great move for Keita, but now I think there are teams out there that need midfielders, and I think Keita can get a move to an even bigger club.
That's exactly what I was just gonna bring up.
Yeah, like next summer, I think he can go to Barca.
What's to say that he has to limit himself to Liverpool? And no disrespect to Liverpool, they have some very exciting players at the club. No disrespect at all, but the next step he could be to a team like Barcelona, to a team, well, not Real. You know how stacked Real's midfield is, but to a team in like the real upper tier of European football. So at that point, it almost makes sense for him to stay on another year rather than go to Liverpool with the intention of just using it as a stepping stone club.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, that's a good point.
If he waits till next season, let's assume that Leipzig make the Champions League. He drops a few good performances.
How did Leipzig not make it this year, though?
Wait, they're not in the Champions League?
Because that's what I was asking. Because are Leipzig? Because I heard there's like some controversial thing where their owners own another club in Austria.
That's right.
That plays in European competition. So
let me search that up. Actually,
yeah. So since it's Red Bull that technically owns both the clubs or something, there's some like something about that they can't have 2 clubs owned by the same like tactical like parent or something.
Guys, no, they're allowed in the Champions League. They were gonna get a ban, but
they chose them over Salzburg, right?
Yeah, they're gonna be allowed to play. So yeah, Keita is gonna.
Okay. Yeah, there's no reason for Keita to leave then, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean,
seriously,
I honestly think he can get a move to Barca next year.
Yeah,
if he drops another top season.
Yeah.
But for Liverpool, it's a huge blow because Liverpool, Salah is a really good signing, but they need much more, man. They need fullbacks, they need a defender, they need a midfielder. You can't go into the Champions League with a Henderson, Wijnaldum, Chan midfield. Like that's just you're not gonna go anywhere with that, and your fullbacks are.
You're forgetting Lallana, Coutinho, Firmino, Mane. These are okay players.
Coutinho plays in the front 3, right?
No, they're saying that Coutinho will drop this season.
Midfield, yeah. Again, I just don't like when your midfield is that poor and your fullbacks are not any better. You're just gonna struggle. Like I know Liverpool are gonna be tough to beat at Anfield in Europe because of the crowd, because of Klopp's the way Klopp plays and all that. But ultimately, if you want to go far, you need quality, right? If you want to make a Champions League quarterfinal, semifinal, you need quality. So, Keita might go further in Europe with Leipzig than Liverpool. You never know.
Yeah.
There was some talk about Goretzka, but now that it's all but confirmed that he'll be joining Munich. So I don't know where they go from here, to be honest. There was also a few people crying for Milinkovic-Savic from Lazio, who I'm a huge fan of. such an immense player. In some ways, I think he's the closest thing Serie A have to a Pogba-like player right now. But I don't know if I can see that happening either. So it's a really tough position to get that final piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, that's the thing. Bundesliga, I guess we can all just have the foregone conclusion that Bayern are probably going to walk away with the title.
I guess it looks that way.
Yeah. But yeah, I think next pod we should probably delve more into the Bundesliga. Are you free again some other time, if possible?
Yeah.
You can do that.
I'd love to come back on with you guys. By the way, I've really enjoyed being here,
Yeah.
talking football. It's great. You guys, great guys, right here.
Yeah, man. It was really good, man. So yeah, that's pretty much been it for the FT podcast, episode 21. We're on iTunes. You can subscribe.
We're probably going to be back when the Neymar signing is official.
Yeah, we'll probably be back. And Aaron, I think we'll have you on the next episode.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
I'd love to be back on here.
Yeah, we'll have you on the next one. And man, it's been a pleasure, man. Just chopping it up with you, dude. And yeah, we'll catch y'all later. This has been the FT podcast. Peace.
Take care, guys.